All right. So when you look, this is basically the purpose of the lab calculations, right? The biggest thing you made your mistake on when we did the lab note, when we did the lab book for Gatorade was, because here's the scoring rubric. If we look here, this is the scoring rubric for the lab for Gatorade. And some of you guys, the idea is when I look at a scoring rubric, you're supposed to get the majority of the points. You're supposed to start out with a 26 out of 26. And the last 4 points are the hardest points to get because that's where you're making connections and thinking and critically thinking. You can't make us critically think? Yes, I can. So if you look, here's the rubric it's slightly different than the rubric I used, but this is a general rubric I used. Some of you guys left the table of contents where it was not updated. That's just ridiculous. You have to update the table of contents. Table of contents has to be updated. Every time you do a lab, update the table of contents. That's 1 point right there. Some people didn't use blue or black ink. Some people used a different color pen or pencil in the lab book. What? So these are points you're supposed to get. You're supposed to get that, title and a date. Every time you have a lab, you write the title and the date on the lab book. Okay? Purpose. What was the purpose of our Gatorade lab? Someone tell me. Raise your hand. What was the purpose of our Gatorade lab? Yes. Exactly. To find the concentration of dye in Gatorade. Some of you guys, you have to know the purpose of the lab. Just like the purpose of the hand warmer lab was to find the cheapest one, the lowest cost and the most heat. That was the idea, right? So when you go to do this, then what you have to pay attention to is you have to write out a purpose. Some people wrote a purpose and didn't even mention anything about the dye and the concentration of Gatorade. That was the overall point of the lab. You get 1 point, 2 points for that, right there. Modified procedure, written as numbered steps, not as I told you guys that, make sure it's written as numbered steps. Only a few people wrote it as a paragraph. But modified procedure, when I say box, means if it says measure out like 10 milliliters of solution, in the sentence means box it. I didn't mark it out for that because I didn't highlight it the last time. But like you should start boxing key things because you can put a little tail on it like this, and it makes like a little Publix checklist. So, like, let's say you're doing something and you have to keep everything at 25 degrees Celsius, or you put it in a water bath for 5 minutes. If you highlight that in the sentence, it's easier to pick out. It's kind of like in textbooks when they make a word that's kind of bold compared to the rest of the words. That's what that means. I didn't stress and I didn't mark out points for that. Data tables, overall, were good. You basically have to have titles on every chart or every data table. There are a few people in here that didn't even put a title on their data table. It had to do with FDC, blue, dye. You fill it in. It was right off the same thing on your lab sheet. People just didn't write a title. You're losing a point there. All the data with correct sig figs. Charts aren't split between pages. You never split a chart between pages. That wasn't included in your rubric. Neatness. Here's where you made your mistake. One of the big mistakes is the day I went over the calculations with you before you added to the lab book, kind of like what I'm doing now, I said in class, I did this. This is what you should do. If you're calculating out the delta H for NaCl, let's say that's what your group did, for NaCl, you write a title, double underline it, then this comes. I have to be able to see what you're calculating quickly. If you turn it into a scavenger hunt, I'm going to get frustrated, and I guarantee every single calculation you do has to have a title. So you'd say delta H for NaCl. Then the formula, here's my formula, you don't write the word formula. My formula, then I pop the numbers in with units, answer box with units, and you're good to go. That's the trifecta. That prepares you for the exam. It prepares you for college. It makes it easy to see if you made a mistake, if you use the wrong formula or you use the wrong numbers when we go over calculations in class. It's designed to make you a better student. But some of you guys just aren't doing it. If you're not doing it on the homework, your homework grade will be 50% now. If you violate the trifecta rule, I basically take 10 points from you. Because the reality is it's second quarter now. We're moving on. That was first quarter. First quarter, we're learning how to do stuff. Now it's game on. Now we're in second quarter. We're moving forward. You have to respect the trifecta. So let's go back. So that's what one of you, but I only took 1 point off. Titles on all, where are we here? Titles on all calcs. Setups on all calcs, trifecta, all key calcs. Some of you guys didn't even do all the calcs. I did all the Gatorade calcs, just so you know, on the board before you even put it in a lab book. It was all up here on the whiteboard, all of it. So you basically had to do Beer's-Law to verify the concentration. M1V1 is equal to M2V2, right? You do that 8 times to get the concentrations. Then you basically popped it in, you got the slope intercept. You calculated the concentration of dye, and then we did a grid to find the mass of the dye. Those are the calculations that had to have been in there. There were 4 key ones. Some of you guys left them out. Just didn't even have them in there. Units on all calcs. Then we get to graphs. You should always get the 3 graphing forms. One is for having a, I don't know what just happened there. Did it stop recording? No. One is for having a title. One is for having the labels on the sides and the units. The unit for concentration was in micromolarity. I would say at least 6 people in this class left it off and you lost the point. You're giving away points for silly, silly things. These are, you know in bingo, there's a middle square. You know what it's called? The first 26 points in my lab grid are free spaces. It's literally, you can't mess these up. But sometimes people do. Then we get down to the conclusion. What does specific and precise mean? The conclusion in your Gatorade lab, you had to figure out the amount of dye in Gatorade. That was the purpose, conclusion, directly linked together. You should have told me the exact amount in your conclusion. You should have told me what was the exact amount of Gatorade that was in there. If you don't tell me the exact amount, why are you doing the lab? Some of you guys said, oh, yeah, the lab worked and we found the amount of dye in Gatorade, period. That's all. Your conclusion should be a single sentence. Your hand warmer conclusion should be a single sentence. You should tell me what compound you would use for a hand warmer. Boom. Boom. Why? Like one quick sentence, easily enough. Most heat and cheapest, or just generally most heat for the cost, percent or whatever. Then here's the 4 you got to work for. Clear connection to the chemistry concept. That's the idea of Beer's law. Beer's law, remember Beer's law is A is equal to E, B, C. Absorbance and concentration are directly related. So by using this spectrophotometer to find absorbance, we're able to find concentration. I would say about 80% of you guys were able to do that. If you can't explain what calorimetry is and the point of this, then I'm not sure what you're getting out of the class. But that's pretty easy to earn. Experimental sources of error, anything is okay. Because on the exam, they'll always ask you, well, what could be a possible error? Explain one. It should be an easy point. Some people didn't even do it. Percent error calculation. If I give you an actual value, you have to do a percent error. You would show me the setup. People lost points because they didn't even put the setup for it. Trifecta, trifecta, trifecta. Setup, numbers, answer. You get a point for that. This is the hardest point to earn. And I spelled that word wrong. I just noticed. Anyway, if you got everything else and were able to explain it, you should have a 29 out of 30. That's a pretty good grade compared to your honors grades on your lab notebooks, I would say, right? Yes. The one point that you have to earn and have to explain is mathematical error. And I went over it the day before you started putting your lab books together. If, for example, in this Beer's Law one, your concentration was too big compared to what the real concentration in Gatorade was, because I showed you. If your concentration was too big, what does that mean? It means that your absorbance had to be too big and you could explain it. But mathematically, we use the concentration then in the grid to figure out the number of grams of dye in Gatorade, right? Whoops. I was automatically write dye, but you try to find the grams of dye. So you found the concentration in molarity, put the molarity into the grid and did this. You have to explain what the relationship is. If this number's too big, guess what you're going to do? You're going to mathematically overestimate the amount of dye. Just like if you were doing a density lab. Let's say you were doing Great Vice President. I think I used this one before. Where do I add a slide? If you look right here, Great Vice President, right? You're trying to find the molar mass of a gas. You do this a lot in college. Let's say you had error. The pressure that you measured was too high. Mathematically, what is that going to do to your molar mass? It's going to make your molar mass smaller. So if it's smaller than the actual value, you're tying the two things together always to the calculation. Always go back to the math. Because on the AP exam, when they give you your lab question, they're going to ask you to connect that to the molar mass. Does that make sense? Questions on how to approach your lab book. There were so many free spaces you guys missed. You should have started out at a 26, and then if you're good, connected to the lab, you get a 28, you get a 29. That's how I design every lab. The easy stuff. This is all the easy stuff up here. This is all the stuff just random. You just basically put it in there, get it done, label your calculations. So when you have a calculation, in the hand warmer ones, title every one, formula, numbers, units. People are getting docked for units. You got to pick it up because you have to improve the quality of your work. It's just the way, it's what's required. It is what's required. Okay? Does that make sense?